She's my baby. Good girl. You going on a boat? Hope so. Right, Golly? Good girl. Yeah, good girl you are, aren't you? Hey? You're my little angel.
May be used as emergency exits. You can open or close the windows whenever you like, but there are little catches in the handles at the top of the windows, and you must release both sides together before the windows will either open or close. In the event of an emergency, I would tell you what to do over the loudspeaker system, or failing that, the crew would come around and speak to you individually. Having said all that, one or two of you looking a bit worried now. So if you are worried about the water, you'll be pleased to know that where we're going to sail this morning, the deepest water is only 8 feet deep. And as this is a double-decker boat, even if we did sink all the way to the bottom, those of you upstairs might not notice. Down below, they might just get their feet wet. So not so much to worry about. So thank you for listening.
I love that. People upstairs won't take much notice. People now said, might just get that thing.
This one coming towards you, there's one down the newish one. But he has had
Okay, here we go. First thing we're going to do is turn the boat all the way around. Once we're faced downstream, we'll head off through the village of Horning, out onto the open green marshes, and we'll take you up to Ranworth and Malthouse Broads.
Sorry, I mentioned.
That's all right.
We'll turn on those
movie
broads
cameras.
and we'll bring you back here for approximately 12 o'clock. Now, for those of you who went straight upstairs as you first boarded the boat, you do get the best view from the upper deck. But you might also miss out on one of the most important parts of the boat, which is, of course, the bar downstairs. You'll find Anne and Jackie behind the bar this morning, and if it is maybe a little early in the day to start on the navy run, well, there's plenty of tea and coffee there too, in proper china cups, and you are welcome to take your drinks anywhere on board that you want to. If you do feel hungry, we have a small range of snacks also available from the bar, including some homemade cakes made by local bakers. Now, one thing I should point out right at the beginning of the trip, it's quite possible that as we go along, a few people you don't know may well wave to you, or even take your photograph. Now, don't be alarmed. This happens to all sorts of famous people who want to practice the royal wave, don't need to go down. Over to our left, or port side, just here, is Horning Village Stage. You come here by boat. The moorings are free. That's something which you'd find throughout the Norfolk Broads. If you really like the water so much that you want to live on it, then over on the right or starboard side is the Horning Village Marina, which does contain a number of houseboats. Now, quite a few people live on the right-hand side of the river. The only drawback if you do live over there, there's only one way to get there, and that is by boat. So first thing in the morning before you start your day, you have to row yourself across the river to the Horning side. Of course, later on in the day, you have to row yourself back again as well. Not too bad on a sunny day, but not so much fun in the winter. So if you wanted to live by the waterside, it would be much more convenient if you could have one of these rather nice houses over on the Horning side. And they do occasionally come up for sale. A nice 4-bedroom detached house by the edge of the water here, with a place to keep the boat, would typically cost somewhere between £600,000 and £700,000. In the World War, that big shed was used for building motor torpedo boats. And over the last few years, more and more people have taken to living in their regular boats by the waterside. And here on the right-hand side, you can see some really quite nice boats, which are used as people's homes. Some of the people living here have gone to a lot of trouble to build nice gardens and moorings where they keep their boats. One great advantage if you do decide to live in a real boat by the waterside, well, as long as you move your boat every so often, even if you bring it back the next day, then there's no council tax to pay. You might just want to come here on holiday, of course, and lots of people on the Norfolk Broads do hire out a boat for their holidays. But there are other places to stay, and many of these riverside properties are available to rent out. One of the poshest of them all is just here to our left-hand side. It's called Deerfoot, and if you want to hire that one out in the middle of summer, it'll cost you £2,300 per week, though it does sleep up to 10 people. Coming up on our left-hand side just here, one of my favourite riverside properties, this little thatched cottage. You see, it's got its own thatched boat shed alongside it, and behind it all is a lagoon, which during the summer is covered in lilies. See, it's also very popular with the geese. There's mostly grey lag geese surrounding those people there. We do have a lot of thatched properties in this area. Not surprising really, because we grow the thatch in the marsh here. But although most of the roof is made of Norfolk thatching reed, the ridge of the roof is made of sedge grass, and that's held in place with a crisscross pattern of hazel sticks. Well, as we come round this next bend in the river, you'll be able to see some of our older thatched properties known as the Georgian lodges. Many of these are over 100 years old and mostly were built as weekend cottages and summer holiday homes. This very first one we come to is one of the prettiest of them. This one was completely renovated 7 years ago, including a brand new thatched roof. But after they finished their restoration, the owners then got a digger machine and they built a brand new dike to the rear of the main property. At the end of that dike they built a magnificent brand new thatched boat shed, which must have impressed the neighbours no end, as a couple of years later the neighbours built an even bigger boat shed next door.
Oh yes. Oh, I see it.
Now, many of these old places had wooden posts as foundation. The thing is, by the edge of the water here, that the land is so very soft and boggy that you can't build a normal house. What they used to do instead was to drive wooden posts into the marsh and build the house on top of those. But of course the marsh is very wet, so the wooden posts soon start to get damp and start to rot away. As a result, many of these older houses have either sunk a little or sometimes gone a bit lopsided. Most unusual holiday home. Just coming into sight from behind that group of trees is an old Norfolk windmill. It was built there just over 200 years ago, and for the first 100 years that it stood there, it was in use as a working wind pump. In the 1930s, when it was no longer required for pumping water, it was converted to make a 3-bedroom cottage. And over the years it has become quite famous. So you'll find it on most of the picture postcards. But it was up for sale a few years ago, and you could have bought that windmill for £295,000. Though if that does seem a bit much, we do have a postcard of it downstairs for 20 pence.
I like that.
Up ahead of us now, we're approaching the ferry crossing point. There has been a ferry across the river here for over 1,000 years. joining the wood Bastwick Stave on our right-hand side to the Horning side where the ferry inn is. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, the ferryboat operator stopped trading, so we've been without a grey lag geese once again. The ferry in itself has a long very history. The building that you see there now is obviously fairly modern. That's because the previous one burnt down in 1970 when its thatched roof caught light. The one before that was bombed by the Luftwaffe in 1942. But the history of that pub goes way back to a group of Benedictine monks who first started selling their homemade mead there over 500 years ago. Now, the wood Bastwick Stave on our right-hand side is also the starting point of a nature trail. And along the right-hand bank from here, you'll see a little... boats in that marina, and most of those boats are privately owned. Anybody can keep a boat in there, but you do have to pay a mooring fee. Typically about £2,000 per year for each boat. Some of the boats which you see in there are ocean-going boats. There's only a handful of those, but those which go to sea have radars, aerials and things like that on top of the boat. And if you do want to go out to sea from here, we are headed in the right direction at the moment, although it is another 24 miles by water down to the coast at Great Yarmouth, and takes around about 4 hours by boat to get there. We're coming up to the very last house in the village now. So it's a heron just sitting in the garden of this very last house. But this was also an old Georgian lodge, but the original one fell down 7 years ago, and it's since been replaced with a brand new building exactly the same size and shape as the original. It was quite a surprise when the first one fell down. There was no warning. The old place was in use as a holiday home at the time. There was a young couple staying there right in the middle of the summer. Everything seemed to be going really well for them, until the Wednesday morning when we came by to see the old house leaning over about 15 degrees to one side. It seems that the wooden posts which held it up had given way quite suddenly overnight. The end of the week. So as we leave that house and Horning behind, we're coming now to the area which is known as the Bure Marshes. All around us here the land is very soft and boggy, in some places completely flooded. Very difficult to cross by foot, but ideal for growing thatching reed, and you can see it on both sides of the river. To Cockshoot Dyke. This is where the nature trail leads to, and as we pass this end of the dyke, you can just about see to the far end of it. It's about a quarter of a mile or so long. If you did go down there, right at the very end you'd find a bird watching hide, and from there you can look out over Cockshoot Broad Nature Reserve. Once we pass this point though, there are no more roads or footpaths, so we are now entering one of the many areas of the Norfolk Broads which can only be reached by boat. Over to our left-hand side, just here, you can see one of our reed beds, which is still regularly harvested for the thatch which it produces. Norfolk thatching reed grows to about 6 feet tall, but at the end of every summer, everything dies off, leaving just the dead stalks of the reed standing. That's perfectly natural though, and the following year it'll all grow back up again. So as each year goes by, another set of dead stalks is left behind, and traditionally the reed cutter would allow the reeds to accumulate for 3 or 4 years before cutting it all down in one go in the middle of winter. But more recent thinking is that you get better quality of reed if you harvest it every year. So the reed bed to our left here has been cut each winter for the last 6 years. Now, the cutting is done sometime between November and February, and when the reed cutter comes here to harvest the reed, of course he has to come by boat. Once he gets out of his boat though, he may well find himself up to his knees in water. Then he has to wade through the marsh, cutting down the reed, which he gathers into bundles and stacks up by the edge of the bank. And there the reeds may stay for several months, until come the spring and the thatchers are ready to start work again, then they'll come along in a small boat and take all the reeds away. It takes approximately 2.5 acres of reed marsh to get enough reeds for one roof, and it'll take the reed cutter around about 10 days to harvest. So with all that effort that goes in, it's not surprising that Norfolk reed is a bit more expensive than straw. But it's well worth it. A roof made of Norfolk thatching reed will last you for about 80 years. Straw roofs rarely last any more than 25. Well, the route which we're following this morning can be found in one of Arthur Ransom's storybooks. Most people remember him as the author of Swallows and Amazons. But in 1930, Arthur Ransom came and stayed in Horning. He spent about 6 months here, travelling around the waterways in a small boat, and eventually he wrote 2 books about the Norfolk Broads. One of those books was called The Coot Club, after the bird. And in that book, the adventure starts off in Horning, more or less where we did, coming down the River Bure here, past the Willow Pattern Gardens and the waterworks, and then up onto Ranworth Broad, where we're going. Now, the first of those features, the Willow Pattern Gardens, is coming up on our left-hand side. Its proper name is Burefields. This place was built in the 1920s by a London businessman called Mr. Story. Apparently, he'd made a fortune manufacturing matches. Well, Mr. Story must have spent a good deal here on the house and gardens. He employed 3 gardeners, and he kept them here for 5 years. Whilst they were here, he had them copy the picture from the Willow Pattern china plate and make into real life size what they saw. And here in this middle section of the garden coming up, you can see the little thatched summer house with the flying swan weather vane on the top. Behind that, shrubbery, between the 2 waterways which are now filled up with reeds, and there's bridges across the waterways as well. So that was the Willow Pattern Garden. Just the one house there, Burefields House, recently rethatched, though many of those outbuildings do look grand enough to be homes themselves, but they are just boat sheds and things like that. As we go by. So on Sundays, you can come here by boat and use that mooring while you go to Sunday service.
Thank you.
Up ahead on the right hand side there's a dredging operation been going on. It's been going on for some time now. Of course the machine at either end can only work when the barge is present. Now, for those of you with very good eyesight, over on the far right-hand side, in the distance there, you can see the top of Ranworth Church Tower. We'll be much closer to that church tower when we go on the Broad, and you'll be able to see everything much more clearly from there. But depending how good your eyesight is, you might be able to see there's two people moving around on top of the church tower at the moment. The gentleman a £30 pike. And the marsh harrier like to nest and breed amongst these reed beds. And reed beds here in Norfolk are also home to the rare swallowtail butterfly.
Yes.
Eh? Do you like it on the boat? I don't know why. Nice and calm up here.
Well, so far we've spent the first part of our journey on the River Bure. It is one of the busiest of the waterways in this part of Norfolk and is navigable for a total distance of 35 miles. At this point here we are approximately 23 miles now from the coast at Great Yarmouth, but only about gates or anything else in the way, so it's fairly straightforward to cross from one river to the next. If you want to travel by boat from here to Norwich, well, on a nice sunny day, it is a lovely journey. I did it a couple of weeks ago. But there are no shortcuts. So from here you do have to go all the way down to Great Yarmouth first, across Braden Water, then back up on the River Yare. And although it might be a lovely journey, from here to Norwich by boat takes 8 hours. If you're in a hurry though, where you see the church tower still on the right there, that's the village of Ranworth where we're headed. If you were to get on the bus just by the church there, you could be in Norwich within 20 minutes. So we're going to leave the River Bure in a moment. From the river we were on just a few moments ago. This is a man-made waterway. It was built by the villagers of Ranworth just over 500 years ago. And they built this dike so they could get an access for cargo boats up to the edge of their village. In those days, just over to our right hand side here you can see a rather boggy area which has recently been cleared of trees. That's the work of the Broads Authority. They've cut down the trees to make space for the reeds to grow, and the reeds have started to re-establish themselves now that they can see the sunlight again. There is a problem if you cut down trees in this area because you can only get here by boat and it's impractical to go loading trees onto boats, so they usually make a clearing and have a bonfire, and just round the corner here on the right you'll see where they had one quite close to the edge of the water there. If you don't cut down the trees, well, you might think, well, excuse me. If you don't cut down the trees, well, then you can see over on the left-hand side here what happens as this area on the left was an extensive reed bed up until about 15 years ago, and since that time it's been neglected, and during the last 15 years while it's been neglected the trees have grown up to such an extent that you can see they've completely taken over so that hardly any reeds are growing there at all.
Smack sweetie.
There are two quite separate broads up here. We're going to go to our left-hand side onto Malthouse Broad. The other broad, which is on the right-hand side, is the Randwick Broad. Here is called St Helens, and as you can see, the church tower is one of the few in the country which is open to the public. People often climb up to the top there for the wonderful view. So here we are about to enter Malthouse Broad. If anybody's at all nervous of the wide open expanse of water which we're coming to, well, there's nothing to worry about. The deepest water in here is only 5 feet deep. Even in the middle, the broad is still only 5 feet deep. And that's because this is not a natural waterway at all. Most of these broads areas of ours were originally peat diggings. The villagers used to burn it on their fires. They called it turf, and it can be found in a seam about 5 feet beneath the ground. To make it into a fuel, all you have to do is dig it up and let it dry. Now, the use of peat started over 1,000 years ago, and it's thought that some of the Viking settlers were the first people to discover it and start using it. But its use continued for many hundreds of years, during which time huge quantities were dug up and not only burnt locally but also shipped by the boatload to other towns and villages nearby. But the use of peat became increasingly difficult over the years as rising water levels caused flooding in the peatworks, and one by one these peatworks were gradually abandoned, and most of them were abandoned somewhere between 14 and 1500. These days there are approximately 2,000 acres of old disused peat diggings which are now the Broads part of the Norfolk Broads. Time for us to turn round now, so we're going to go around a big circle. There's a tern flying just past us there, diving in the water on the right hand side. Ranworth Village stave dead ahead. Behind the stave they see the single-storey tiled building, which is the old barley store, part of the original maltings. Though these days it's a tourist information centre, restaurant and a shop. Very peaceful waterway, this one. There's no tide or current in this broad. It's only one way in or out. That's the dike which we came in by. Because of that, and because the water is very shallow, and as you can see there's virtually no waves, this is an ideal place if you want to learn how to sail. And lots of beginners come here to practice with their dinghies. But beginner sailors can do some rather strange things. A little while ago we got to this point when I saw a middle-aged chap in a dinghy, all on his own, obviously teaching himself how to sail. Nothing wrong with that, except it looked like he was going to go straight in front of us, and we might have run him over. So to avoid an accident, seeing how he was a beginner, we brought our boat to a complete stop in the water and waited for the gentleman to sail past us. As he got closer to us though, he started to panic. At the very last minute he changed his mind and decided to alter course. But he'd left it too late. As he altered course, he lost control of his boat and crashed into the side of us. Well, no harm was done, nobody was hurt, but he was rather embarrassed, and I could hear one or two of our passengers downstairs offering him some advice. After a few minutes, with a very red face, he was ready to have another go. By that time, lots more people were leaning out over the side of our boat. As he set off for a second attempt, they gave him a big cheer, and we all stood and watched as he sailed round the front of our boat and crashed in the other side.
Oh my God.
CDs, they gave me copies, and the one I've got in the machine at the moment is called The Love Mode. So I hope you like jazz music. We'll play some.
Say cheers to Stella.
Cheers.
Cheers to Auntie Stella. Go on, and one called
Cheers,
Warwick.
Auntie Stella.
And Uncle Warwick.
And Uncle
Well, you're
Warwick.
on TV. Where's the music? Oh, nice music. Think.
Fit with me again.
Wait till I start the film. I mean, can't talk before I've actually commenced filming it. Right.
Cheers, Stella.
Say it with a bit of gusto. I'll edit that bit out.
Cheers, Stella.
That's better.
You can edit that bit up.
Looks like you like the beer more than Stella.
No, I don't. I like the beer as much as I like
Think of it.
Stella.
They got that stinking heat in South Carolina.
Too
Here we
hot.
are
Hey, say
in a
to,
lovely pub.
say to her, it's too
Having
hot in South Carolina at the moment.
It's too hot for us in South Carolina.
She should be in England.
You should be in England now that the rain is here, the rainy season. But today it's good. What? Oh, let the dog in is the Wi-Fi password.